Okay, so in the last video, we went um, from 37. Okay, so we went from a base 10 number to a different base. So our answer was in base 2 or base 5 or base 12. Now we are going to go from a weird base, another base, to base 10. This is actually much easier. The last one we did by dividing. This one we do by multiplication. More people enjoy multiplication than division for some reason. Okay, so let me show you. It's fairly simple. So what I first want you to realize is that the 4, notice it says it's in base 5. So notice the units. For our units, that 2 is in the 5 to the to the 0. Before in base 10, it was 10 to the 0, okay? And then our 3 is in our 5 to the first place, not 10 to the first, 5 to the first. And then this is 5 to the second. So if you notice, all we did was we changed the base for when would write it in expanded form, okay? So just quick, this was a review from way up here. Where's our expanded when we did some expanded? Okay, here was our expanded. Notice when we expanded it, it was all in base 10. Base 10, base 10, base 10. So now if it's in base 5, we change all those 10s to 5. If we're in base 11, we change the 10s to 11. If we're in base 20, we change the 10 to 20, okay? So we're going to basically write this in expanded form first. So let's get to it. All right, so we're going to write this in expanded form. So here we go. We've got the 5 to the second, 5 to the first, and 5 to the 0. And we're going to add the 4, the 3, and the 2. In other words, that 4 is 4 times 5 to the second. Plus, remember we talked about this plus before, that the insides are going to have pluses, okay? Not multiplication, okay? Going to have pluses. So I should probably highlight that. There we go. All right. So I should look back up there one more time. Sorry about that. So if you notice, so you had your number here goes here, right? Your number, like the 3, went with right here in the hundreds place. The 4 went right here in the tens place. Does that make sense? This 2 was in the thousands place. So that was our 10 to the third. So we're going to do the exact same thing, except all we're going to do is we're going to change this guy right there. Okay, these guys are going to have different bases. All right, so let's get going. All right, so that's what I did. So now it's 4 times 5 squared. Well, 5 squared is just 25. And the other one is 3 times 5 to the first. Well, 5 to the first is just 5. So I'm going to replace 5 squared, 5 to the first, and 5 to the 0 with what they are. 5 to the second is 25. 5 to the first is 5. And anything to the 0 is 1. And then we just multiply those guys together. 4 times 25 is 100. 3 times 5 is 15. 2 times 1 is 2. And then we just add them all up. Okay, it's much easier than, I think, than the other thing, going backwards, going from 117 to base 5. Anyway, let's do just a couple more. So 213 base 5. So first thing you got to do is realize that what place the 2 is in, the 1 is in, and the 3 is in. Then you write it with, I'll just go ahead and write the 2 and the 1 and the 3, and you multiply them by 5 to the second, 5 to the first, or 5 to the 0, okay, depending on what place they're in. Then you multiply, you figure out what that 5 to the second, 5 to the first, and 5 to the 0 is, and then you multiply those together. 2 times 25 is 50. 1 times 5 is 5. 3 times 1 is 3. So that's just going to be 58. All right, one more. I went ahead and wrote the 5 to the second, 5 to the first, and 5 to the 0 again. Then I put in my 3, 4, and my 1. Figure out what 5 to the second is. Then I'm going to multiply that 3 times my 25 and get 75. 4 times 5 and get 20. And 1 times 1 and get 1. So 75 and 20 and 1, that's going to be, what, 96? Okay. Now notice there were no zeros in there. So we're going to do some that have zeros, but this time we're not going to base 10. We're going to base 2. So now all of these guys right there, instead of being 5s, and they're 5s because it was base 5, right? 5 because it was base 5. So now it's 2, so guess what it's going to be? Yep, it's going to be 2, base 2. And there's base 2 has a whole, they're really long numbers. Okay, so I go ahead and think, okay, that's 2 to the 0, and I'm reading it left to right, but I'm really thinking I'm doing this is 0. That one's going to be 2 to the first, 2 to the second, 2 to the third, 2 to the fourth, 2 to the fifth. Okay, and I write those out. I just go ahead and write them out, and then I'm going to add my numbers in. So that's the 1. Notice I've got a 0 in there for our next one because that's our 0. I put my 1 in, another 1 in, and there's that 0. Okay, and then the next step is to figure out what 2 to the 5th is, and 2 to the 4th, and 2 to the 3rd to actually calculate those. And honestly, the zeros, you don't really have to worry about that too much because 0 times anything is 0. Anyway, and now we're going to multiply 1 times 32 and get 32. And then 1 times 8, and 1 times 4, and 1 times 1. I went ahead and kept my zeros just sort of as placeholders to help my students. Y'all are my students, but you're going to have your own students one day. And I add it all together and get 45. Okay, got just a few more. I'm still in base 2, so I'm still going to be using 2 to the 3rd, 2 to the 2nd, 2 to the 1st, 2 to the 0. Now, easy, you can go back and say, okay, that's 0, that's 1, that's 2, that's 3. You can also say, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 places, so I'm going to have 2 to the 3rd. So either way, it doesn't really matter how you do it. So then you fill in your numbers that you have right here. You put those in these places for place value, right? And then we've got to figure out 2 to the 3rd, that was 8, right? 2 to the 3rd, 2 to the 2nd is 4, 2 to the 1st is 2, anything to the 0 is 1, and then you just do the multiplication, then you add. Okay, so we've done a base 5, we've done base 2. Let's go ahead and do base 12. Okay, so base 12, so with base 12, I went ahead and put it on top. So that's going to be 12 to the 0, 12 to the 0, 12 to the first, and 12 to the second. And then I put my numbers in. I've got a 9 and a 2 and an E. What in the world's an E? Do y'all remember what E is? E stands for 11 in the base 12 system. So now we've got to figure, our next step really is to figure out what 12 to the second is. 12 to the first, we know that's always 1. So that's that. So this one you'd have to actually, have to do a little bit of multiplication, not with your calculator because your students won't have a calculator. So you're not going to have a calculator on your test. Anyway, so that's some big old numbers we're adding. But you're going to get 1,331. Okay, one more, still base 12. We're going to have, what, 12 to the second, 12 to the first, and 12 to the 0. Put in my numbers, or my letter, in this case, T. What did T stand for? Do you remember? 10. So now I'm going to put the T, put my 10 right here, just like I put my 11 over here. Anyway, and then I've got to multiply those together. and then add. Okay, so again, I think that's a little bit easier than going backwards. I mean, we're actually going backwards, but going from the number we know to 12, you do division. But when I've given you it in a, a wonky base, something other than base 10, you're going to multiply. All right, so again, there's another practice sheet and more videos on YouTube. Okay. Now I told you that there were other systems, and I showed you the Egyptian, the Babylonian, the Mayan. Showed you some of their really cool symbols and stuff. But these guys are extinct for a reason. We don't use them anymore because they are a pain in the booty. Okay, I'll try and remember to bring my Mayan. I've got a Mayan, my anniversary written in Mayan. It takes up a whole page. So, and I'm not that old, so it's not that big of a number. Anyway, um, so we've got that extra practice that we did. Here is some more extra practice. This was the other way. I consider this a little bit harder. So I'm not going to actually work these. This would have gone with the other video, the last video I made, 3.1b. But I'm going to go ahead and uncover these and let you guys work them out and try it. Okay. I don't have a video that actually works them, but try and work it on your own and then come back and make sure that you got the same thing that I did. All right. I look forward to seeing you guys in class.